The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain. Prayer by the chaplain.
Eternal and sovereign Father, we find ourselves in challenging times. The COVID pandemic has taken a toll on our public health, economy, and national morale. Stress and conflict have become the norm in various settings. Problems often seem far more numerous than solutions. Lord, protect the men and women serving in the House of Representatives from discouragement. Enable them to focus on promoting what is good, right, and true. Grant wisdom that will help them unravel complicated problems, recognize unintended consequences, and balance competing interests in an equitable way. Allow them to accomplish the people's business in a manner that honors you and benefits the citizens of Minnesota. I also ask, Father, that you enable the women and men of this body to encourage one another. Empower them to speak words full of grace and truth. Grant them the ability to be good listeners, especially toward those with whom they often disagree. Enable them to treat each other with patience, civility, and respect. Help them to recognize that those whose opinions differ from their own are still usually interested in what they believe to be the common good. Finally, Lord, I ask that every individual here would experience your grace and blessing in his or her life. Each representative brings personal concerns into this room. Someone may be waiting for a biopsy result. Another person might be concerned about a son or daughter who is making poor choices. Another may be experiencing significant marital conflict. Others might be struggling with personal temptations or addictions. In each case, I pray you would provide the grace and strength needed for the challenges and tasks of this day. Amen.
The chaplain for today is the Reverend Dan Erickson from Chisholm Baptist Church, Chisholm, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members, when the chief clerk calls the roll today to establish a quorum, please state your name, your location, that you are present. Members using the remote voting technology, please also press the green yes button when your name is called. The clerk will take the roll.
Acom.
Minnetonka, present.
Acom, Minnetonka, present. Agbadge.
Agbadge, St. Paul, present.
Agbadge, St. Paul, present. Ackland.
Ackland, St. Paul, present.
Ackland, St. Paul, present. Albright.
Albright, Prior Lake, present.
Albright, Prior Lake, present. Anderson.
Anderson, St. Paul, present.
Anderson, St. Paul, present. Backer.
Backer, Browns Valley, present.
Backer, Browns Valley, present. Bonner.
Bonner, St. Paul, present.
Bonner, St. Paul, present. Barr.
Barr, East Bethel, present.
Barr, East Bethel, present. Baker.
Baker, St. Paul, present.
Baker, St. Paul, present. Becker, Finn.
Becker, Finn, Roseville, present.
Becker, Finn, Roseville, present. Bennett.
Bennett, St. Paul, present.
Bennett, St. Paul, present. Berg.
Berg, St. Paul, present.
Berg, St. Paul, present. Bernardi.
Bernardi, St. Paul, present.
Bernardi, St. Paul, present. Bierman.
Bierman, Apple Valley, present.
Bierman, Apple Valley, present. Bliss.
Bliss, St. Paul, present.
Bliss, St. Paul, present. Bow.
Bo Chanhassen, present.
Bow, Chanhassen, present. Bolden.
Bolden, Rochester, present.
Bolden, Rochester, present. Burkle.
Burkle, St. Paul, present.
Burkle, St. Paul, present. Carlson.
Carlson, St. Paul, present.
Carlson, St. Paul, present. Christensen.
Christensen, Stillwater, present.
Christensen, Stillwater, present. Daniels.
Daniels, Faribault, present.
Daniels, Faribault, present. Doubt. Doubt.
Doubt, St. Paul, present.
Doubt, St. Paul, present. Davids. David, St. Paul, present. Davney.
Dabney, St. Paul, present.
Davney, St. Paul, present. Damath.
Damath, St. Paul, present.
Damath, St. Paul, present. Detmer.
Detmer, Forest Lake, present.
Detmer, Forest Lake, present. Drazkowski. Drazkowski, St. Paul, present. Eklund.
Eklund, St. Paul, present.
Eklund, St. Paul, present. Edelson.
Edelson, Edina, present.
Edelson, Edina, present. Elkins.
Elkins, St. Paul, present.
Elkins, St. Paul, present. Erickson.
Erickson, St. Paul, present.
Erickson, St. Paul, present. Feist.
Feist, St. Paul, present.
Feist, St. Paul, present. Fisher.
Fisher, St. Paul, present.
Fisher, St. Paul, present. Frankie.
Frankie, St. Paul Park, present.
Frankie, St. Paul Park, present. Franzen.
Franson, St. Paul, present.
Franzen, St. Paul, present. Frazier.
Fraser, New Hope, present.
Frazier, New Hope, present. Frederick.
Frederick, St. Paul, present.
Frederick, St. Paul, present. Freiberg.
Freiburg, Golden Valley, present.
Freiberg, Golden Valley, present. Garofalo. Garofalo, St. Paul, present. Gomez.
Gomez, Minneapolis, present.
Gomez, Minneapolis, present. Green.
Green, St. Paul, present.
Green, St. Paul, present. Greenman.
Greenman, St. Paul, present.
Greenman, St. Paul, present. Grossel.
Grossel, Clearbrook, present.
Grossel, Clearbrook, present. Gruenhagen. Gruenhagen, St. Paul, present. Haley. Haley, St. Paul, present. Hamilton.
Hamilton, St. Paul, present.
Hamilton, St. Paul, present. Hanson R.
Hanson R., St. Paul, present.
Hanson R, St. Paul, present. Hanson J.
Hanson J. Burnsville, present.
Hanson J. Burnsville, present. Hassan, excused. Hausman.
Hausman, St. Paul, present.
Hausman, St. Paul, present. Heinrich.
Heinrich, Anoka, present.
Heinrich, Anoka, present. Heinzman.
Heinzman, St. Paul, present.
Heinzman, St. Paul, present. Her, St. Paul, present. Hertas. Hertas, St. Paul, present. Hollins.
Collins, St. Paul, present.
Hollins, St. Paul, present. Hornstein.
Hornstein, Minneapolis, present.
Hornstein, Minneapolis, present. Howard. Howard, St. Paul, present. Hewitt.
Hewitt, St. Paul, present.
Hewitt, St. Paul, present. Igo.
Igo, St. Paul, present.
Igo, St. Paul, present. Johnson.
Johnson, St. Paul, present.
Johnson, St. Paul, present. Jordan.
Jordan, St. Paul, present.
Jordan, St. Paul, present. Jurgens.
Jurgens, Cottage Grove, present.
Jurgens, Cottage Grove, present. Keeler.
Keeler, St. Paul, present.
Keeler, St. Paul, present. Keel.
Keel, Hammond Township, present.
Keel, Hammond Township, present. Cleavorn.
Cleburne, St. Paul, present.
Cleavorn, St. Paul, present. Cagle.
Cagle, St. Paul, present.
Cagle, St. Paul, present. Katiza Wattoon.
Katiza Wattoon, Eden Prairie, present.
Katiza Wattoon, Eden Prairie, present. Cosnick.
Cosmic, St. Paul, present.
Cosnick, St. Paul, present. Creshaw.
Creshaw, Little Falls, present.
Creshaw, Little Falls, present. Lee.
Lee, Minneapolis, present.
Lee, Minneapolis, present. Liebling.
Liebling, St. Paul, present.
Liebling, St. Paul, present. Lily.
Lily, North St. Paul, present.
Lily, North St. Paul, present. Lippert.
Lippert, St. Paul, present.
Lippert, St. Paul, present. Listlegard.
Listlegard, St. Paul, present.
Listlegard, St. Paul, present. Long. Long, St. Paul, present. Lucero.
Lucero, Wright County, present.
Lucero, Wright County, present. Lewick.
Lewick, St. Paul, present.
Lewick, St. Paul, present. Mariani.
Mariani, St. Paul, present.
Mariani, St. Paul, present. Markwart.
Markwart, Dilworth, present.
Markwart, Dilworth, present. Mason.
Mason, Egan, present.
Mason, Egan, present. McDonald.
McDonald, Delano, present.
McDonald, Delano, present. Mecklin.
Macklin, Becker Township, present.
Mecklin, Becker Township, present. Miller. Miller, St. Paul, present. Moeller.
Moeller, Shoreview, present.
Moeller, Shoreview, present. Moran. Moran.
Moran, St. Paul, present.
Moran, St. Paul, present. Morrison.
Morrison, Deep Haven, present.
Morrison, Deep Haven, present. Mortensen.
Mortensen, St. Paul, present.
Mortensen, St. Paul, present. Mueller.
Mueller, St. Paul, present.
Mueller, St. Paul, present. Munson.
Munson, St. Paul, present.
Munson, St. Paul, present. Murphy.
Murphy, Hermantown, present.
Murphy, Hermantown, present. Nash.
Nash, St. Paul, present.
Nash, St. Paul, present. Nelson M.
Nelson M., Brooklyn Park, present.
Nelson M. Brooklyn Park, present. Nelson N.
Nelson N., St. Paul, present.
Nelson N. St. Paul, present. New Brindley. New Brindley, St. Paul, present. Noor.
Noor, Minneapolis, present.
Noor, Minneapolis, present. Novotny.
Novotny, St. Paul, present.
Novotny, St. Paul, present. O'Driscoll. O'Driscoll, St. Paul, present. Olson B.
Olson B., St. Paul, present.
Olson B. St. Paul, present. Olson L.
Olson L, Duluth, present.
Olson L. Duluth, present. O'Neill.
O'Neill, St. Paul, present.
O'Neill, St. Paul, present. Pulowski.
Pulowski, St. Paul, present.
Pulowski, St. Paul, present. Petersburg.
Petersburg, St. Paul, present.
Petersburg, St. Paul, present. Farr.
Farr, LeSueur, present.
Farr, LeSueur, present. Pearson.
Pearson, Rochester Township, present.
Pearson, Rochester Township, present. Pinto.
Pinto, St. Paul, present.
Pinto, St. Paul, present. Poston.
Poston, St. Paul, present.
Poston, St. Paul, present. Pryor.
Pryor, Minnetonka, present.
Pryor, Minnetonka, present. Quam.
Guam, Byron, present.
Quam, Byron, present. Raleigh.
Raleigh, St. Paul, present.
Raleigh, St. Paul, present. Rasmussen. Rasmussen, St. Paul, present. Ryer.
Ryer, St. Paul, present.
Ryer, St. Paul, present. Richardson.
Richardson, Mendota Heights, present.
Richardson, Mendota Heights, present. Robbins. Robbins, St. Paul, present. Sandell.
Sandell, St. Paul, present.
Sandell, St. Paul, present. Sandsted.
Sandsted, Hibbing, present.
Sandsted, Hibbing, present. Schumacher.
Schumacher, Laverne, present.
Schumacher, Laverne, present. Schultz.
Schultz, St. Paul, present.
Schultz, St. Paul, present. Scott.
Scott, St. Paul, present.
Scott, St. Paul, present. Stevenson.
Stevenson, St. Paul, present.
Stevenson, St. Paul, present. Sundin.
Sundin, St. Paul, present.
Sundin, St. Paul, present. Swazinski.
Swazinski, St. Paul, present.
Swazinski, St. Paul, present. Tice.
Tice, St. Paul, present.
Tice, St. Paul, present. Thompson.
Thompson, St. present.
Thompson, St. Paul, present. Torkelson.
Torkelson, St. Paul, present.
Torkelson, St. Paul, present. Erdahl. Erdahl, St. Paul, present. Vang.
Vang, St. Paul, present.
Vang, St. Paul, present. Waslowick.
Waslowick, St. Paul, present.
Waslowick, St. Paul, present. West.
West Blaine, present.
West, Blaine, present. Winkler. Winkler, St. Paul, present. Walgamot. Walgamot, St. Paul, present. Zhang Jie.
Joan J. St. Paul, present.
Zhang Jie, St. Paul, present. Zhang Ti.
Zhang T. St. Paul, present.
Zhang Ti, St. Paul, present. Joachim.
Joachim St. Paul present.
Joachim St. Paul, present. Speaker Hartman. Speaker Hartman, St. Paul, present.
Members, if you are using the remote voting technology, please press the green or yes button if you are present. And please use the green button only to indicate your presence. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 92nd session, 2021, 6th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Thursday, January 21st, 2021.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business is online. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 270 through 337.
First reading, House Files 270 through 337. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate file number 192. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading, Senate file number 192, an act relating to unemployment insurance. Nor move that Senate file number 192 and House file number 135, now on the general register, be referred to the chief clerk for comparison.
Without objection, so ordered. Motions and resolutions. The copies of the non-controversial motions are at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. There's a resolution at the desk. The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution number 1, a House resolution condemning violence and violent rhetoric directed at our United States Capitol. Long moves that House resolution be now adopted. There are amendments at the desk.
There are amendments at the desk. Representative Long, to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a time to stand behind our democracy and to come together to condemn violence against our elected leaders and our symbols of democracy, our United States and state capitals. We must not only reject what has happened over the last several weeks, we must also reject why it has happened. Our right to free and fair elections were under attack. The very founding principles of our country were under attack. The clear goal of the mob that threatened members of Congress and killed a police officer was to prevent the certification of election results, including those of Minnesota. Vice President Pence's life was under threat. Rioters were calling for him by name, and if you watch some of the videos, it's very chilling to hear. At one point, press reported the rioters came within 100 feet of where the vice president was hiding with his family. Officer Eugene Goodman bravely led them away from his location and from the Senate chamber, perhaps saving lives. Speaker Nancy Pelosi's life was also under threat. Protesters, rioters were also calling out her name. This was for fulfilling their constitutional obligations. Members of Congress called their loved ones, thinking that it could be their final call, thinking that this might be the plane is going down moment. They were told to hide under their seats. They were told to put on gas masks. Those who were in the upper gallery of the House of Representatives were locked in because they could not be evacuated right away, and they waited for many minutes in terror, hiding under their seats before being moved. I worked in the United States Capitol for many years, and staff members, just like I was, had to hide under tables, barricade doors, and turn off the lights, hoping that they wouldn't be found by the mob. More than 50 police were injured, and 5 people died, including 2 police officers. Our state capitals have likewise been targeted. The governor has had to mobilize the National Guard to protect our capital. Due to the threats, his family was forced to evacuate their residence, and he spoke movingly about his son being terrified and looking for his dog. The governor has mobilized 750 Minnesota National Guard who are deployed to protect the inauguration. The resolution that we have before us today is an attempt to craft a factual statement that acknowledges the deeply troubling nature of these events. I want to thank Representatives Doubt, New Brindley, and Barr for your suggested edits that have improved the amendment of the resolution and that we have incorporated. We've approached this with a spirit of bipartisanship. This resolution is an effort to come together in solidarity as one legislative body to denounce violence and to support our democracy. This is not only a violence is bad moment. This is not only a tone down the rhetoric moment. It is a moment to stand firmly for our democracy. Our democracy is the fundamental source of pride for our nation. We celebrate our founders. We teach about our unique system of government in our schools. Promoting democracy has been the cornerstone of our foreign policy. We have fought wars, and countless numbers of those in uniform have lost their lives to protect democratic principles. Violence driven to undermine our democracy must be rejected. We must be forthright in saying our democracy, it is sound, it is legitimate, it is strong, and threats against it cannot stand and will not succeed. In the deeply moving words of poet Amanda Gorman, while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. I hope this body can come together today and stand behind this resolution. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend House Resolution Number 1, the first engrossment, as follows. The amendment is coded HR 1A3.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski, 2-year amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I stand before you today to bring forward an amendment to the resolution that improves it dramatically. And members, if you can't hear me very well, it's because we have seen from the majority here in the House their attempt over the last couple of weeks to tell many of us to shut up because they don't like what we're saying. Members, I for one am a member that is not going to shut up because we have people in the majority that want to abuse their power to force us into their will because they don't believe and agree with our politics. I bring before you, members, an amendment to the resolution that improves the language, that not only acknowledges the fact that I believe the Democrat caucus might have sent forward a statement condemning the violence that happened at the U.S. Capitol. The other two caucuses did the same. I haven't seen the Democrats one, but I've seen both House Republican caucuses forward statements condemning that violence. And now we have here today from the Rules Committee yet another instrument to communicate that on behalf of the whole body. Parts of this I very much agree with. Parts of it I have problems again with what is an effort by the majority to force without debate and ability to amend. And that's why I'm bringing the amendment, members, to bring in some additional ideas that strengthen what we have in front of us. In addition, members, to condemning the violence that happened in Washington, D.C., and I don't know a single member here who was in Washington, D.C. that week. And I haven't heard of anybody, and I don't suspect there was anyone in Washington, D.C. that week. But members, we had members of this body that spoke at a rally outside of this Capitol, like we have done many, many, many times, with a rally that was peaceful and did nothing that was violent. Yet we have the Speaker of this House and the Majority Leader, members, that in their efforts to make us shut up.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Representative Winkler, for what purpose do you rise?
Madam Speaker, under Mason's 124, personalities and motives in debate, Madam Speaker, it is not the subject of the Speaker of the House or the Majority Leader of the House before us right now. The issue before us is an amendment to a resolution.
Representative Drazkowski, please continue without violating Mason's or the rules of the House. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the leadership of this body brought forward a statement to the media that was inflammatory and inaccurate. And they did it recklessly, with reckless abandon, without even knowing what did or did not occur at the rally outside of the Minnesota State Capitol. We had in one of the discussions, a member of our leadership said, "But I will tell you that we're investigating whether there were members of the Minnesota House of Representatives who advocated for, incited, or supported acts of domestic terrorism." Members, if that doesn't give you pause, that there were statements like that made of members of this body when none of that occurred, that should chill you like it's chilling Minnesotans around this state. Members, I wonder, or Madam Speaker, I wonder if the Majority Leader would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Winkler, is there an investigation going on that the House is conducting about anybody who was at the rally on January 6th?
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, Representative Drazkowski, though that is not the subject of the debate before the body right now, the answer to your question is no.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Winkler continue to yield?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Winkler, has there ever been an investigation that the House of Representatives has been engaged with related to the January 6th rally outside of the Minnesota Capitol?
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, Representative Drazkowski, the subject of this debate is your amendment to a resolution. If you wish to rise to a privilege of the House at some point in time to discuss your personal feelings, that would be in order. The answer to your question is, I am not aware of anybody of the Minnesota House of Representatives conducting an investigation related to that rally.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Madam Speaker, Representative Winkler and members, that's what I understand too. And I understand there never was an investigation, Representative Winkler, Madam Speaker. But here we have a news article from the Mankato Free Press. House to investigate Ackland Munson over state capitol rally. Quoted in the article, our leadership said, we're investigating whether there were members of the Minnesota House of Representatives who advocated for, incited, or supported acts of domestic terrorism. Madam Speaker, would Representative Winkler yield again?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Majority Leader Winkler, given the fact that we agree there's no investigation happening, there hasn't been any investigation happening, and I'd ask you to yield again on another question, but I assume the answer is the same. There's not any investigation planned around the January 6th rally. Is this article inaccurate?
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, Representative Drazkowski, I haven't read the article, and I think if you have a concern about a story written in the media, you should address that with the relevant newspaper.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Winkler yield again?
He will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Winkler, I'll read the headline to you again. House to investigate Ackland Munson over state capitol rally. Mankato Free Press, January 11th, 2021. And Representative Winkler, you just said before the body that there's not been an investigation and there's not an investigation in the House or any that you're aware of. So, Representative Winkler, given that reality and this headline that I just read to you twice, is this inaccurate? It looks to me to be inaccurate. I'm thinking I'd like you to weigh in. Is it inaccurate or accurate?
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, Representative Drazkowski, as I said, I haven't actually seen the headline. The statement that you just made, purporting to be a headline, sounds as if that would be inaccurate, but I haven't read the article, so it's very difficult to provide that context. And I would remind you again that we are under an amendment to a House resolution. We are not on the actions or statements of members of this body outside of this resolution debate.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Winkler. The reality is it's very inaccurate. And the names of members of this body have been sullied by the recklessness of the leadership of this body. We haven't received an apology. Representative Ackland hasn't received an apology. She deserves one. The Mankato Free Press deserves a phone call to tell them they're way out in the swamp on this one. From the Democrats. The Star Tribune, Madam Speaker, said that our leadership said, quote, Wednesday, that state authorities are investigating the St. Paul rally, at which 6 GOP state representatives appeared.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
She said the investigation is being
State your point of order.
Madam Speaker, under Mason's 101, the debate has to be limited to questions before the body. The question before the body is whether the resolution offered by Representative Long should be amended as proposed by Representative Drazkowski. That is what the debate should be and exclusively needs to be about under our rules.
I find the point of order well taken. The member shall confine his remarks to the matter before the body. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Representative Winkler and members, if you will look at the amendment, we bring notice to the fact that we can't only be condemning what happened in Washington, we also have to be condemning the squelching of speech, political free speech among people. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Madam Speaker, Representative Winkler, members, our rules of this House, our Constitution of our state, and the Constitution of the United States of America are in place to prevent the tyranny of the majority, to protect the minority. We have behind us a series of events that took place that I am trying to acknowledge in this resolution, Madam Speaker, in this amendment, a delete everything amendment to this resolution, which will acknowledge that we shouldn't be condemning people and attempting to criminalize political speech that we don't agree with. And that's what took place here, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have an amendment to the amendment.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend his amendment to House Resolution Number 1, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment to the amendment is coded 1A4.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, members, the amendment to the amendment is short. I'll read it to you. It adds in, be it resolved, any member who attempts to criminalize political speech by their action may be subject to referral to the Ethics Committee.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Representative Winkler, for what purpose do you rise?
Madam Speaker, under House Rule 3.21, motions and propositions must be germane. This amendment would be germane to a debate on the rules of the House, possibly to the joint rules, but it is not germane to this amendment. It seeks to establish an ethical standard governing the House rules on a resolution that has no such force or effect. So this is not a germane amendment to the amendment, and I would ask you to find it out of order.
I find the point of order well taken. To the main amendment to the main amendment to the resolution. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I look forward to more discussion on the amendment. I'm wondering, Madam Speaker, if Representative Miller would yield.
Representative Miller, will you yield? He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Miller, you shared a story with me about your direct observations, direct evidence that you have of the chilling impact that the leadership of this House, through the actions that I talked about earlier, have had on the environment and the people around the Capitol and throughout Minnesota. Would you share those with us?
Representative Miller. Representative Miller, will you double check, make sure your microphone is turned on? Representative Miller.
Are we going good now? Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I apologize as I'm enclosed in this mask. I'm not just saying this for statements. I'm saying it's very difficult to breathe. So you're going to have dramatic pauses here so that I can get some oxygen in between statements. So, Madam Speaker, members, Representative Drazkowski, what I began to say was, as I listened to this, and this will address what I'm about to say as to my experience, I really believe this House resolution is putting on trial what free speech is in Minnesota. It's at its fundamental core. We're going to the level of having the House make a proclamation, and we're going to vote on an oath, if you will, as to determining the definition of what free speech is. This has a very dramatic effect on how people speak. the story that I shared with Representative Drazkowski goes to the chilling effect that this can have on people. Last week, I left, I was going out to supper with someone. I'm thankful we can go to a restaurant. I was going to supper with someone, and I had to walk out to meet someone in a car in between the state office building and the MnDOT parking garage in that lot. And I was walking past a group of DNR officers. I always forget what their official title is, but DNR officers. They were equipping what I assume was for the evening. I kind of saw them suiting up and heading out. And I had small talk with them. How you doing? Thanks for being here. I was a little surprised that the DNR would have officers here, but I guess it's all hands on deck. For another time, another discussion, my opinion on that. But in any case, they were there. And I said, so how are things going? And they said, pretty good, pretty good. Now, I was in street clothes. I didn't know who I was, but I don't think that should matter, regardless of my position. I was just someone walking through. And I said, have you seen anything going on around here over the last couple days? And they said, no. And I said, I'm very thankful for that. And they agreed. And without solicitation, this was a quote from one of the officers. After the speaker said what she did about those people that spoke at that last rally, that put the fear of God in them, and you won't see anyone around here again talking like that. I thought that was inappropriate. I went and reported it up the chain of command, and I'm sure that it's been dealt with. But Madam Speaker, what he is trying to do with his amendment is draw on the fact that words mean things in this room. You're going to hear from another representative later that you keep using the word democracy, and it may not be important to you, but it's important to him that constitutionally this is a republic. Words mean things in this room. And so if Representative Long is going to come forward with a charge, of very strong words, we better mean what we say and say what we mean. And I'm really concerned that when Representative Drazkowski is trying to state this and trying to state in his way, this has happened to me before in this room, he's trying to state in his way what his amendment is. We have a thought police that stands up and says that he's out of order. Now, are we going to talk about free speech in this room, or are we just going to define it and then say you have to talk within our constraints of what free speech is? If we can't have latitude here, I shudder to think what the Constitution means to the people out there who don't even have a voice in this room. Thank you, Representative Drazkowski, for coming forward with this amendment. Hopefully we can bring a little sanity into this room.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Miller. Madam Speaker, would Representative Winkler yield, please?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Winkler, you've been around here a long time. Can you even remember leadership in this body using law enforcement to investigate a member for a crime with absolutely no evidence?
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, Representative Drazkowski, I believe what you are referring to is a review by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension of a rally that took place on the steps of the Capitol on the same day that a similar rally took place in the United States Capitol. And at the United States Capitol, it resulted in a violent mob threatening the lives of elected representatives and killing people. That same rally in front of the state capitol that same day was entitled Storm the Capitol. Now, I looked it up because I thought maybe there's a definition for storm that means something other than take over, invade, or attack, and it turns out there isn't. So in addition to the title of the rally, there was a statement made by speakers there about Civil War casualties and taking it to elected representatives or elected officials in Minnesota. The BCA reviewed the incident, determined that there was not grounds for a criminal violation because incitement to violence is not free speech. Fortunately, the determination was made that no members of this body had engaged in incitement of violence on the steps of the state capitol that day, but it doesn't mean that asking the question was the wrong thing to do, considering what had happened in Washington, D.C. that same day.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Winkler. Well, Representative Winkler, I agree with part of what you said. But Representative Winkler, when you go out and make allegations of people with absolutely no evidence, and I talked to the leadership of this body about it, and they had absolutely no evidence that the 6 members who spoke at the rally did anything wrong, and still forwarded the narrative, the false, fake, concocted narrative that there was some investigation going on, which you and I and others have acknowledged never existed. I talked to the BCA. There's no investigation. They never initiated an investigation. Not only did they not investigate us, they did not find anything wrong with any of the people who spoke after the rally that we were at. Of course, had the leadership asked us beforehand, all 6 of us spoke before any of the people that spoke, the people had any issue with what they were saying. Not to mention that their speech was legal as well. So, Madam Speaker, Representative Winkler, members, we have before us here a DE amendment that brings forward many of the things that is included in Representative Long's resolution, but adds in protections of speech and protections of diversity of political thought. Imagine that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, members, we can't have an environment that attempts to criminalize free political speech by those in positions of power that disagree with what you say. We cannot have leadership that is divisive behavior that tries to stamp on the free speech rights of other members. Madam Speaker, actions carried out on the brink of ethical conduct by those who should actually be modeling ethical behavior are absolutely wrong, reckless, and short-sighted. Madam Speaker, trying to deprogram people who disagree with you is not leadership. Madam Speaker, canceling out people's freedom under the First Amendment is un-American at best and fascist at worst. Madam Speaker, members, we need to correct the approach. We need to come together. Representative Long, I acknowledge many of the things you have in your resolution. If we take our DE amendment, we will have even better language that recognizes the ability of people to speak about things that they believe in strongly. With that, Madam Speaker, I would ask for a roll call on the amendment to the resolution.
Representative Drazkowski requests a roll call on his amendment. Are there 15 hands? There are not 15 hands in the chamber. Members have 60 seconds to email hands@house.mn. Two. It has been 60 seconds and there are not 15 hands. There will not be a roll call. On request to speak buttons being activated, I have the member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson, to this amendment is my presumption. And then within the chamber, Representative Gruenhagen to this amendment is my presumption. Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. While the basis for the underlying resolution of HR 1 may seem well-intentioned, for those watching from home, we've seen votes just like this one be used for an entirely different political purpose by twisting a legislator's vote on vague language. Now, here it's going to be used by the media and activist groups to condemn or silence debate on this very important issue of elections. Now, we've all sent press releases to the media condemning the violence which occurred in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And this resolution that we're amending does not add to our condemnation. However, House Resolution 1 doesn't just condemn violence in D.C., but on line 2.6, it condemns violence directed at our state capitals, which includes St. Paul, where many of your constituents came to peacefully and lawfully petition their government for redress of grievances. There was no violence. There was nothing unlawful. Now, laid out in simple language on lines 1.21 to 1.22 of the underlying resolution is a uniform condemnation of any legislator or public official who speaks about the need to restore election integrity. It says, whereas public officials around the nation have made troubling statements that led to Americans questioning the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Now, Representative Winkler is handy with a dictionary. I looked up what legitimate means. It means conforming to the law or to rules. So it is a fact that the Secretary of State did not follow election laws during the 2020 election. The resolution continues by stating, whereas efforts to thwart the will of Minnesota voters are undemocratic. Now, if we're talking about the Secretary of State going against election laws that were enacted by the House, the Senate, and signed into law by our governor, even to address COVID, then yes, I would agree. His actions to thwart the will of the Minnesota voters were undemocratic. But my guess is that this vague language of the underlying resolution is going to be weaponized by the media to attack those advocating for election integrity. Now, leadership of the House of Representatives, as Representative Drazkowski said, has either intentionally or accidentally spread lies about to damage the reputations of members of this body. In the Mankato Free Press, as Representative Drazkowski said, in my local Fox and CBS affiliates, along with numerous other local papers, ran repeated stories about the Minnesota House launching an investigation of 6 members of the legislature. And there was, in fact, as Representative Winkler, the majority leader, said, no investigation. And the House does not investigate matters such as this. So this lie about a House investigation that the media ran after violent and criminal acts occurred at our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., 1,105 miles away, has fueled this false information laced in the headlines across our state. Now, we have legislators who are now afraid to speak with their constituents for fear of what might be said by their constituents or others who come to the Capitol. Now, we have rallies here all the time, especially when we don't have COVID, where you may go out and speak to a group of people to express your opinion or hear from them, listen to them, talk with them. And you shouldn't be held accountable to what is said after you leave. Now, people have a constitutional right to petition their government for a redress of grievances. There's a reason that the trust in our mass media has plummeted to 41% because lies are fed to them or they print lies. Now, Trey Muse, the reporter who authored the article that Representative Drazkowski spoke of that has a headline that says House to investigate Ackland and Munson over state capitol rally. The reporter said that the Free Press editor, because I've reached out to him, Representative Winkler, multiple times. The Free Press editor, Joe Spears, said he won't issue a correction or retraction to the headlines unless he, quote, had reason to believe it was a lie before it was printed, unquote. Now, this, even as many letters to the editor have asked that the misinformation not be spread. The editor, Joe Spear, and reporter Trey Muse have 3 times refused to retract a lie in their headline. And this headline is the first article to appear in a Google search when you search for a freshman member of this House. It sullies the reputation of a new member of the legislature, and we can't control what the media prints. They have the First Amendment, but the leadership of this House has a duty to correct a lie that's continuing to be spread by the media. Now, I support Representative Drazkowski's amendment to H.R. 1, and I believe that this appropriately addresses the violent actions which occurred in D.C. while also supporting freedom to speak. Freedom of speech here is on trial with this resolution in condemning people who talk about our role in elections, which is writing laws and hoping that they're enforced by our Secretary of State. Because what we saw in this last election was an end run around our authority in the legislature, and it should not be condemned to speak about the facts and to speak about our role in government. And when people come to this Capitol to petition their government for a redress of grievances, we should be able to talk with them and engage them in the legislative process and explain to them how the laws work and that we do have laws that are in conflict with each other that need to be addressed. And it should not be shameful to speak about election laws and how we need to change things. So again, I support Representative Drazkowski's motion, and I am shocked that there is not 15 members of this body who would actually have a roll call, who would want to be on the record of supporting a resolution like this that actually supports freedom of speech and also addresses the violence that occurred in DC. It doesn't use vague language to talk about violence that occurred at our state capitals because there wasn't violence here. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to request another roll call because I think maybe people had some issues with technology.
Representative Munson requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? There are not 15 hands in the chamber. The clerk will open up hands at house.mn for 60 seconds. There are not 15 hands. The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Yeah, I want to confine my comments to lines 2.7 and 2.9, where you use the ability to speak against your government and condemns any attempts to use violence as a political weapon to silence people who do. You know, we all condemn the violence of any type that was in Washington, D.C., or what we've seen last summer. And no one would disagree with that, okay? I think anybody in the chamber. But members, when it comes to this past January 6th rally, I would simply say that the call for investigation seemed to be more of a political theater than it did of a intentional investigation. You know, I was contacted by 3 newspapers from my district regarding this, and once 2 of them found out that I had never even been called on it and could not verify, even if they had contacted the BCA or the public safety, that there was an investigation, 2 out of the 3 decided not to do an investigation because they saw it for what it was, simply an attempt to silence political speech, I believe. 1 paper did, and the only response they could get, they couldn't get it from the BCA or the public safety, which they emailed, no response. But there was a staff member from Speaker Hortman's office that spoke to them. They used that rather than the people who were charged in doing the investigation and wrote a front page article in one of my local papers, which I am now in the process of trying to correct. So, you know, I think all of the speeches, as far as I was concerned, by the 6 representatives were all on video. Mine was on the internet along with the other ones. I got lots of compliments on my request or comments versus, and there was some criticism. But members, you know, questioning things, and even an election, if we go back to the election of President Trump, we see that there was a host of Democrats questioning the election. And it never did stop, to tell you the truth, almost the whole time that he was in office. So, and yet I did, there was pushback from Republicans, but I didn't see any Republicans trying to silence political speech. And I'm afraid that's what this is trying to do, as previous testifiers have commented. The other thing, members, if we look nationally, we see that 147 congressmen voted not to certify the election of President Biden, and also 8 U.S. senators. So there is some question about this that was brought at a point where these representatives constitutionally took a vote against the certification. Now, what appears to be happening by my DFL colleagues is anybody who questions the election, even those at the federal level, they're trying to be silenced and sullied. And I think that's wrong. It's part of the process, because as we have these disagreements, members, we can come up with a solution. In other words, something negative can produce something positive. And I've said that before. Now today, on bills introduced, I have a voter ID bill. It's House File 293. It also has a Senate comparable bill that's been introduced over in the Senate. Members, let's go with the voter ID and support it. It would solve 90% of the problems that we have here. None of us want to go through this, okay? I don't want to go through this. I don't think any of the representatives on the other side of the aisle want to go through this. Then let's pass some integrity to the system. And voter ID will solve, in my opinion, about 90% of the problems. Now, members, there was a negative entry in the House Journal entered on by 8 DFL legislators. I would ask those 8 DFL legislators to sign on as co-authors to the voter ID bill. That would be bipartisan. Let's fix this problem so we never have to be here again, members. But yet it seems that the DFL, in many cases, resists accountability in terms of fixing our election process. So, members, in terms of the resolution that Representative Long brought forward, I agree with most of it. I do have a lot of concern about the word democracy. We're a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. We're a representative constitutional republic. And I wish that would have been addressed. Members, especially on the other side of the aisle, I do not doubt that you oppose violence, as I do. But let's put this political theater aside and allow open debate even on this question. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I was not going to speak, but I thought I would follow up on my colleague, Representative Grunhagen. I was one of the 6 that spoke that day. And I'll just let you know how this all happened. So I was getting ready for my day, preparing for that day, and I got a text from Representative Lucero asking me if I would speak at this event, and I didn't know what it was on, and I was informed it was election integrity, and so I said, okay, I suppose I can go, and then I showed up there at about 12:11 because I sent him a text and said that I had or I'm sorry, it was not 12:11. It was 11:03 or 11:17. I said, I'm in jeans and a sweatshirt. What time should I head over? And he said, as soon as you can get there. At 11:46, I asked what the theme was. And at 11:48, he said, stop the steal and election integrity. At 12:11, I said, I just got here. going to the Capitol, and then we talked about recording for our episode of The Right View. At 1:04, I asked if he was in his office. So I was there for less than an hour. What I talked about at that day, and I feel like I shouldn't have to explain, but due to the fact that we were accused of inciting violence and being called a domestic terrorist by many individuals, I spoke on the shutdown and what it was doing to our economy and to our businesses and to the Minnesotans that we represent, and how the greatest transfer of wealth is taking place before our very eyes. I spoke about how the richest of the rich are getting richer on the backs of those who are unemployed and losing their businesses, losing their jobs, and losing their incomes. I then spoke about the findings of going through all of the death certificates of those who have been classified as a COVID death. I also then spoke about the PCR testing and how the state of Minnesota does not keep track of the cycle thresholds, and how that government can manipulate then if there's no transparency and control how the virus looks in the state, which now we have found out that the World Health Organization has said that perhaps those cycle thresholds are running too high, and that we need to take a look at that, and maybe people need to be doing 2 tests because of the amount of false positives. Everything that I have stated, that I stated that day at the Capitol, where I also spoke with constituents and those in the surrounding areas around my district, is everything that I have said in public before. So I was very shocked to find out that I was supposedly under investigation for what I had said. And I have been called many names before, but a domestic terrorist was really troublesome and extremely concerning. And to see my colleagues also being brought under that name was extremely, I was appalled. I just was absolutely appalled. And for me, it created a toxic work environment. How can we solve a budget deficit and work together collaboratively for the good of our state when we can't even talk to our constituents about issues of the shutdown, PCR testing, those kind of issues in a public space? So I just want to put it on the record that I am extremely disappointed in how this has happened, the labels that my colleagues and I have been given, and that I hope that we can take this as a learning, a learning incident and do better. I think we all need to just step back and stop with the name calling of one another and actually look at each other as human beings, people with feelings, and perhaps that we don't want to sully each other's reputations just so that we can get some political points and headlines in the paper. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Nicollet, Representative Ackland.
Madam Speaker, thank you for letting me speak. I come at this from just a little bit different point of view. I remember the day in my kitchen that I decided to run for office. And I was standing there watching TV, and there were about 10 people in my kitchen with me. And what I was struck by was the divisiveness in our country. We were watching some national news, and it was so frustrating because every time I saw a vote taken, it was all Democrat and all Republican. There was no compromise anywhere. And I said to the group around me, I said, somebody's got to stand up. Somebody's got to speak up because this divisiveness is killing us. So I ran on that. That was my principle for running. So I came to this position with the primary goal of being instrumental in healing this great division in our country. What I didn't realize the time that I was running and got here, is that same division is 100% within our own state legislature. I, at this point, have not seen an effort to say, let's come together, let's work together. Now, I know there are people in both caucuses that want this, but what I experienced as a result of this rally that occurred on January the 6th, and I won't go into my whole story about how I accidentally ended up out there also, and how my 2-minute speech has caused me a whole week's worth of hateful emails, hateful text messages, hateful phone calls. And they continue. I can't even get my work done for trying to answer all the people. And they don't really even want an answer, some of them. They just want to be heard because they think what I did was so wrong. And I think the people before me have explained what we did was not wrong at all. The word investigation got out and it has stuck in people's minds and it won't be changed. So I come at this in a little bit different way. And you can correct me if I'm out of line, but what I would like to ask is this. I feel like the amendments should be withdrawn. I asked Raz to withdraw his. We won't take a vote on that. And I'm going to ask that we go ahead and vote on this. But I don't want this to be, I want this to say to my Democrat fellow legislators, you have got to hear us. This resolution, it's slanted. It won't, we would have to vote on it by say, well, we agree with most of it, but when something is this important, we need to agree on it. So we needed to say exactly what we wanted to say about condemning violence without kind of casting aspersion on people who were actually gathered for a reasonable purpose. So what I would like to see, this is what I'm asking, is that we go, when we vote, I'm looking for, I don't know how many exactly Democrats it would take, but I'm saying, do not 6 to 8 or 10 of you have the nerve to stand up and say, we heard these Republicans. They have a point. We'll vote no on this because we want to take this back and we want to do it again and we want to do it right. We want something that every one of us can stand up and say, this is what we as the Minnesota State Legislature believes. It's not what does a Democrat believe or a Republican believe. This has caused so much division in my own district. It's like done just the opposite of what I wanted it to do. So I'm trying to bring some healing, even within our own caucus here, and even within the House caucus and the new House caucus, and even with the Republicans and the Democrats. And I think this would be a great place to start. Let's just say, you know what, this was a good first pass. And I know Kurt Doubt and Winkler and you guys have all worked very hard to try to get the wording just right so we would agree. But I can see there's not much agreement here already. And so let's work on it again. Why do we have to do this today? Why does this have to be done today and pass something that's so we can agree to it? We won't get too much pushback on it, but you know, it's one of those things. This is too important. So I just am asking that we come together, that we start today and say, we will work together. We all love Minnesota. We love the people here. We, you and I, we're the ones that are going to start the healing. If we don't, nobody will, and this will continue. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the amendment that has been offered is an entire new resolution. It deletes the entirety of the underlying resolution. And unlike the underlying resolution, which we worked very hard to make bipartisan accommodations to the language, this language has had no bipartisan input as far as I'm aware and includes a dig at our democratically elected Secretary of State. And so I don't believe this resolution is designed to get bipartisan support. And the underlying resolution that we have is designed to make a strong statement on what has been a historic attack on our democratic institutions and our system of government. So I would urge members to vote no.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, Madam Speaker, I'm somewhat confounded with the 15 hands process. Madam Speaker, I'm aware of a number of members who were planning to support 15 hands today. I counted at least 4 or 5 here in the chamber, and I can't believe we didn't get to 15. Madam Speaker, would Representative Acomb yield for a question?
Representative Acomb, will you yield to a question?
Yes, I'll yield.
She will yield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Acomb, I've been in the legislature since 2008. Many of those years, Representative Acomb, it's almost reflexive behavior for many times both the majority and the minority to offer 15 hands or many, many times more than 15 hands in order to provide the transparency that's necessary for people to communicate their vote on issues. So my question to you is, do you or did you or will you support 15 hands on this amendment?
Not today, but thanks for asking.
Representative Winkler, for
Madam
what purpose
Speaker,
do you rise?
Madam Speaker, point of order. It is not in order to ask members how they intend to vote on an issue before the body. And furthermore, Representative Drazkowski, there has twice been a request for a roll call. Twice it has been defeated, and we are on the A3 amendment, which you have offered.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Aguirre yield for a question?
Representative Aguirre, will you yield for a question?
Yes.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Aguirre. Are you supportive of 15 hands on this amendment, Representative Aguirre?
Representative Drazkowski, you're out of order. Representative Drazkowski, do you have a question that's in order?
Madam Speaker, what is out of order of that question?
You may not ask someone how they intend to vote.
Madam Speaker, members, this is an amendment that represents both items, the major items that we have before us. I would ask, Madam Speaker, if we can try 15 hands again.
Representative Drazkowski asks if there are 15 hands. Are there 15 hands? The clerk will see if there are 15 hands via email within 60 seconds. There are not 15 hands. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no.
No.
The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying amendment, the member from Hennepin, Representative Germane.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I am speaking today for the very first time on the House floor, on the House Zoom floor. And I can't think of a more important resolution to speak to. It really matters that we stand up together to defend our democracy, and it matters that we do it now, and it matters that we do it together. This year, our democracy has been tested in unimaginable ways. A presidential election in a global pandemic with a president set on undermining the results. But 2020 was a feat of strength, but democracy survived. 159 million Americans and 3.3 million Minnesotans showed up, turned out, and cast a ballot from every region, every race, every political persuasion. And 30,000 Minnesotans, our friends, our neighbors, were election judges and showed up, risked their health to make sure that everyone could vote. And yet, long after this election, our democracy has continued to be tested. 3 weeks ago, we've seen the impact of months and years of disinformation, of lies fester into conspiracies, fester into violent insurrection to overturn the Capitol. To be clear, this wasn't just an attack on now President Joe Biden, on any one political party. It was an attack on us all. It was an attack on our democracy. And so it matters that we stand up together for the 3.3 million Minnesotans who turned out to vote and the 5.7 million Minnesotans who sent us here to do the work. For every school kid who is now learning about our democracy, that we're going to stand up and say we're here to strengthen it and make sure that it is here for generations to come. I may be new to this chamber, but I'm not new to the work of fighting for our democracy and protecting it. And I can tell you what we're doing here today really matters. This didn't happen overnight, and there are no quick fixes to repair the damage done. But together we can take the first step. We can start by standing up and standing up together. 3 weeks ago, we all stood up together and took an oath. Today, right now, let's stand up together in defense of our democracy and the Minnesotans that sent us here. Members, I'd urge all of us to vote yes and stand up together. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise also like Representative Raymond. This is the first time that I've spoken on the floor in this House, and I say that with a great sense of pride and a great sense of privilege. And I think about what has happened in the last few weeks, and particularly at our Capitol, and prior to that, particularly at our federal Capitol, and prior to that, what was happening around the country within states that were challenging the election results. And I think back to my grandfather, who turned 85 in the past year. My grandfather was 30 years old when the Civil Rights Act was passed. Prior to that, he experienced all types of unimaginable ways to suppress his vote. And he talked to me about that. He told me that what happened at the Capitol on that day on January 6th reminded him of what it was like when he grew up, before the Voters' Rights Act, and even after that. And he grew up in Mississippi in the Deep South. It reminded him of what it was like for a country that did not want his voice to be heard, that did not want his voice to be counted. I think what we're doing today, the reason I'm proud of it, and the reason I'm going to ask everyone in this chamber to vote for it, to vote yes for it. We are a nation made up of states. Each state should be proudly saying that we had a fair and free election, and that the rights and that the votes and the voices based on those votes of our citizens and our residents should be heard and should be counted. No one should have any fear that their votes won't be counted. And no one should have any fear that moving forward, that those votes and their right to vote will be suppressed. So I stand proudly with the members of my caucus that negotiated this, with the members of the other caucus. And I'm proud that it was bipartisan. I'm proud what you have done. And I stand on the shoulders of my grandfather to say that I will proudly be voting yes for this resolution. And I encourage all of you to do the same. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Koochiching, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is an important action we're taking today in this body. The violence in Washington, D.C. on January 6th was something I never thought I'd see, an attempted insurrection with the goal of sabotaging the peaceful transfer of power following a free and fair election is something we must reject and condemn in the strongest terms. It's tragic that this event resulted in the loss of human life, including a member of the Capitol Police. Our founders fought and died for the right to select their own leaders. I wore the uniform of this nation and served, as did many of my colleagues, in support of our republic and our freedom. As Americans, we're going to disagree with each other in politics and policy, just as our system of government allows. It is why we have elections in the first place. It is why the institutions like ours even exist. But to tackle the big challenges before us, we need to have a baseline of trust in one another as Minnesotans and as Americans. The violence of January 6th and the rhetoric that encouraged it breached that trust. This can't be the way forward for our nation. Following an election, no matter how contentious, we shouldn't expect a violent response from a mob to descend on our nation's capital like we saw just over 2 weeks ago. Nor should we expect something similar at our capital, and thank goodness that did not happen. I want to thank members of law enforcement, Capitol Security, and our National Guard, as well as our conservation officers, for stepping up to keep us, each of us, safe. Now, members, it's time to come together to not normalize over-the-top rhetoric, to not give legitimacy to dangerous conspiracy theories, and to all commit to never giving fuel to such dangerous actions with our words. I thank Representative Long for bringing forth this resolution, and I encourage folks to join me in supporting it today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Anoka, Representative Barr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of the House. I wanted to speak today. First, let me start with Representative Long. I appreciate you incorporating many of the changes, but we also did talk about the fact that we are not a democracy and we are a republic. So I wanted to start with that and kind of talk about the difference between a democracy and a republic. And the fact that, well, let's just start with Article 4, Section 4 of the federal Constitution, specifically states, quote, "The United States shall guarantee to each state in this union a republican form of government," close quote. We are not a democracy. And to kind of put a real hard point on some of the differences between this, Ben Franklin was asked after the Constitutional Convention, "What form of government have you given us, sir?" And he said, "A republic if you can keep it." And later on, he went on to describe the difference between a republic and talk about a democracy as two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. So the republic is the way that the minority gets its rights protected from the tyranny of a majority, or a tyranny of mob rule, as it is. So this resolution is actually calling out the violence at the Capitol, which is, kind of a mob thing. One of the words that you removed was a mob, and I appreciate that. But that's where the sentiment is at, and that's what a democracy actually is. So, Representative Greenman, you mentioned your oath of office, and yes, I too am very proud of the oath of office. I've taken it now 3 times at the Capitol, and I took it 4 times when I was in the military. So yes, your oath of office says to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and in that Constitution it says that we're a republic. 3 times in this resolution it specifically says that calls our form of government a democracy, and the one time that it is actually correct is on line 1.23, where it says our democratic process, which is correct. We do have a democratic process for selecting our leaders, but our government is not a democracy, it is a republic. The differences may seem slight. The differences may be, in people's minds, may be absolutely null. But we as elected members, elected officials, should always be exacting in our terminology and never let anything sloppy like this move through. We've seen for the freshman members, you're going to be treated to this later on this year. When we get to the last week of session, there is a ton of things that move through at the last minute, and it's very sloppy work. And we end up coming back with a reviser's bill that changes all kinds of things that we missed, whether it's periods or dots or filling in the blanks on something or a reference to one statute to another. When things move this fast, it's those large things move that fast, it gets sloppy. This is well-intentioned, and I do not condone the violence. I want to make that perfectly clear. I do not condone any of the violence, but we as elected officials need to be exacting in our terminology and not perpetuate an untruth that is believed in the public. I've received letters from the League of Women Voters, who is nothing but voting, and they have referred to our form of government as both a democracy and a republic in the same sentence. I was in a committee meeting last year on the Education Policy Committee where Representative Erdahl was having a bill on civics class, and he had 5 testifiers. Of those 5 testifiers, there was 3 different versions of our government. They referred to us as 3 different ways. So I know this is a large problem, but it is one of those things that should never not be allowed to continue without continually being corrected by those of us who have a position where we have the ability to correct it. And if we could change some of these things from democracy, our democracy, over to our republic, I would actually support a lot of the language in here, and I would have nowhere near as much problem. But we do need to correct these things, and because this is wholly inaccurate even in our form of government, I cannot support this as it sits now. And this is part of the problem: is the underlying thing. The democracy it talks about, in a democracy, the governing body can do whatever it wants to do. It's not limited. And that is one of the things that leads to a lot of the discontent in the population, is that some good large portions of our population believe that their government is supposed to be limited by a constitution and only do those things that are listed in the Constitution, and everything else is reserved to the people. In a democracy, the governing body can rule on anything it decides to rule on. And that is one of the things that is causing a lot of the distrust, the angst amongst the population. And perpetuating this untruth is not doing a service to us. It's not doing a service to our form of government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Scott, Representative Mortensen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This resolution was introduced as a resolution condemning violence. And I wish that were true, but clearly this is not just condemning violence, which I think we all condemn the violence, but this is in reality political theater complete with a script, as the first 3 speakers read from a script. Now, of course, I condemn the violence, but when I look at this resolution as seen in front of us, I agree with Representative Barr. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. You won't even find the word democracy in the Minnesota State Constitution. And furthermore, what has me concerned is the way I read this, and for those who aren't seeing it, it says, "Be it further resolved that the House of Representatives of the state of Minnesota reaffirms our commitment to democracy, free and fair elections, and the rule of law." Well, in my 3 weeks here, I've not seen this body reaffirming its commitment to the democratic process, because we still have a governor who has unilateral control of the state. So I'm frankly shocked that the first 3 speakers, who have routinely voted to keep this peacetime emergency going, in other words, not operate in a democratic way, imploring us to support this. So until this body reasserts itself as a co-equal branch of government, I find this final statement entirely false, and I can't support it.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak in support of House Resolution 1. What our country experienced this last election, the claims made to undermine the election results leading to the violence that culminated on January 6th in our nation's capital, is beyond fathomable. It is unfathomable for me because of the very nature of how I came to be in this country. I've spoken a number of times about my heritage, how my maternal grandfather was a colonel in the Secret War, a war where he fought alongside American soldiers. He had never lived under a democratic system, but he knew that that was the right way to govern. That is why he and tens of thousands of Hmong soldiers fought to defend democracy. America was not only our dream, but has been the beacon of hope for all those who live under systems of government that are unstable, oppressive, and tyrannical. The world is watching us. That is why we must unequivocally condemn the violence directed at the United States Capitol and at state capitals across the country. We must support the arrest and prosecution of those who participated in the criminal destruction of property and assaults on our law enforcement officials in the United States Capitol, and stand behind our voters in certification of our election system. It is critical that we show the world that we are committed to democracy, free and fair elections, and the rule of law. President Biden said, democracy is precious, democracy is fragile, and at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. I believe our democracy is fragile and can be undermined, as we saw with this last election and what culminated afterwards. We must never forget that we uphold our democracy as a collective. We must do everything we can to maintain the integrity of our election by standing up when it is under attack so that it always prevails. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of House Resolution 1, and I thank Representative Long for introducing it and bringing it forward. Many serving in this House are from marginalized communities who have experienced discrimination and generational trauma simply based on identity. I'm particularly cognizant of this reality as a child of Holocaust survivors. The images and symbols beamed from the U.S. Capitol on January 6th were especially troubling for our communities, and we feel particularly threatened and vulnerable in this moment. That is why a strong bipartisan vote in support of this resolution condemning violence driven by hate is especially timely today. And that is why your green vote means so much. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the insurrection on January 6th cut a deep wound into our democracy that will only heal if we stand together to denounce the violence and denounce what preceded it, unprecedented attempts to discredit our free and fair elections. Passing this resolution today is our opportunity as a body to stand together and state that now in the future, the Minnesota House of Representatives will stand for reason, truth, and democracy. Other members have detailed the depravity of what happened on January 6th, the day that will live in infamy for our country's history. And I'll just say for me, as I watched it, I was struck simultaneously by disbelief that this could happen in our country, and also a sense that it was somehow inevitable, given the big lie that had metastasized into an insurrection. Speaking for myself, another emotion I had was regret. Regret that I didn't personally do more to stand up to these lies in the months that preceded it. Some of them were so absurd. Legions of dead people and animals voting, trucks pulling up to back doors with hundreds of thousands of ballots, the dead president of Venezuela orchestrating a massive coordinated attack on our democracy. You know, what's the harm? In a few months, we'll have a new president. But what we learned, what we all can learn, and I hope we'll all do some soul searching about, is that when lies about our democracy go unanswered and take hold, there are dangerous, dangerous outcomes. When my 6-year-old Calvin tells me that he's got a monster under his bed, I don't say, geez, I saw on Facebook there was a kid in Arizona that also had a monster under his bed. And I saw that there's a kid in Pennsylvania that has a monster under his bed as well. The reality is the big lie of voter fraud, and the more subtle lies as well, can be a powerful monster. But it has a weakness. The weakness is critical thinking. The weakness is truth. And together, that's what this resolution is all about, our opportunity to stand up for our democracy. Members, there's been a lot of debate today, so much of it not on exactly what's before the body. And I thought it was really important to read what we are standing as a body to say today. Be it resolved that the House of Representatives in the state of Minnesota stands behind the will of Minnesota voters and supports the full certification of its Electoral College votes by the United States Congress. Be it resolved that the House of Representatives in the state of Minnesota condemns the attack on our constitutional democracy. Be it resolved that the House of Representatives of the state of Minnesota reaffirms our commitment to democracy, free and fair elections, and the rule of law. Members, these are words today, but more importantly, they can be actions tomorrow. They should be at the core of how we conduct ourselves in this body, in a state and country that I know that all of us love. This isn't partisan, it is patriotic. And with love of state and country, I look forward to a strong, bipartisan vote in favor of reason, truth, and our enduring democracy. And Madam Speaker, it is in that vein that I request a roll call vote.
Representative Howard requests a roll call vote. There are not 15 hands in the chamber. The clerk will open up hands at house.mn for 60 seconds. We have 15 hands, so there will be a roll call. It's my understanding there's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House Resolution number 1 as follows. Page 1. Page 1, line 4, add period after election and delete everything after.
Representative New Brindley, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion.
Discussion to the New Brindley amendment. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no.
Aye.
The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House Resolution number 1 as follows. Page 2, line 14, delete democracy and insert constitutional republic.
Representative New Brindley, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to amend the resolution for the sake of accuracy. While I know that in common nomenclature, our form of government is often referred to as a democracy, it's just not. We actually have a constitutional republic. And so for the sake of accuracy, we'd like to change the phrasing here in the resolution to make sure that we are correctly representing our government. And I would ask for a roll call vote, Madam Speaker.
Representative New Brindley requests a roll call on the amendment. There are 16 members in the chamber, and I think they all have their hands up, so you will get your roll call. Discussion to the New Brindley, second New Brindley amendment. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to oppose the amendment. We do, in fact, live in a representational democracy. I think if you ask Minnesotans what form of government we have, they will say democracy. It used to say constitutional democracy, and we cut constitutional to try to make a gesture towards the folks on the other side of the aisle and just say democracy so that it was clear it was in the common usage and we wouldn't get into constitutional debates. But apparently we couldn't agree to that. So I would urge members to vote no.
Will the clerk repeat the oral amendment? Members who are following along on Zoom need clarity on what they are voting on.
New Brindley is moving to amend House Resolution number 1, the first engrossment. On page 2, line 14, delete democracy and insert constitutional republic.
Discussion. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, members, I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Representative New Brindley, closing argument.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a little odd to me, to be honest. I do appreciate there was certainly a lot of questionable language included in the original version of this resolution. We have tried to work very hard to make sure that the language included is actually factual. And so this is really odd that the majority would be resistant to a factual change. This is very strange. I am not sure why they would be resistant to identifying our government correctly. We have a constitutional republic. This is not rocket science. This is not tricky. We're not trying to trick anyone. We are just seeking accuracy in the resolution. So, Madam Speaker and members, I would encourage a yes vote.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise only quickly just to observe that I looked up, while we were having this discussion, I looked into Black's Law Dictionary, which for lawyers is a pretty authoritative source. They actually define the term democracy. The first definition listed there is government by the people, either directly or through representatives elected by the people, which is pretty clearly what we have. And then if you go on further to the end of it, it says CF, which means cross-reference republic. I think generally speaking, if you draw a Venn diagram, one circle representing term democracy, one term representing the term republic, there's a period of overlap in the middle, and that's where we find ourselves here in the United States. So I don't think we need to support this amendment.
Any further discussion to the
Madam
amendment? State your name.
Lucero.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just would like to remind the body that when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. Madam Speaker and members, there should be no disagreement, no hesitation to make an amendment to voting yes to change this to the accurate description of what we are, just as we said at the opening of this body when we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the republic for which we stand. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Haley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members and members of the majority party, we started this discussion with a lot of talk about the bipartisan work and discussion that had gone into this original resolution. So I find it quite interesting right now that we're having this debate over this language. If our goal is to have a bipartisan discussion, let's move forward, and what we're doing now is really silliness.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the oral amendment. Members, if your fingerprint technology is not working, or you're voting a different way this time than you checked in, we will call your name momentarily. Members, please vote.
Clerk will call the names of those not voting remotely.
The clerk will call the names of those not voting remotely.
Barr.
Barr, aye.
Barr votes aye. Bernardi.
Bernardi, no.
Bernardi, no. Doubt.
Doubt votes aye.
Doubt, aye. Davney.
Daphne, no.
Davney, no. Drazkowski. Drazkowski, aye. Grassel. Grassel.
Russell votes aye.
Grassel, aye. Haley. Haley, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, no.
Hausman, no. Heinrich.
Heinrich votes aye.
Heinrich, aye. Hertas. Hertas, aye. Lippert.
Lippert, no.
Lippert, no. Mariani.
Mariani, no.
Mariani, no. Mason.
No.
Mason, no. Miller. Miller, aye. Pulowski.
Pulowski, no.
Pulowski, no. Ryer.
Ryer, no.
Ryer, no. Robbins. Robbins, aye. Sandell.
Sandell, no.
Sandell, no. Sundin.
Sundin, no.
Sundin, no. West.
West, aye.
West, aye. Walgamot. Walgamot, no. Clerk will close the roll and we'll have the total if you're done.
The clerk will close the roll if all those who would like to vote have voted.
Poston votes aye.
Poston votes.
Poston votes aye. Gonna have to add that.
Christensen.
Bierman votes no.
Bierman votes no.
Christensen, no.
Christensen, no. Her, no. So that's, what? Not hearing it. Sandsted.
Madam Speaker, I'm staying off the board on this vote.
You may say pass.
Pass.
Have all those voted who wanted to vote?
So that's 1 aye and 3 noes.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 64 ayes and 68 noes, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House Resolution Number 1, the first engrossment as amended as follows. Page 1, delete lines 21 and 22, and the amendment is coded RA 21-001.
Representative New Brindley, to your third oral amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my amendment, and I would ask for a yes vote.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While I do not believe that the amendment is necessary and that the underlying whereas clause is factual in the spirit of bipartisanship, I urge members to support the amendment.
All those in favor of the New Brindley amendment, please vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please vote no.
Aye.
The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. Any further discussion? Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for the important debate that we have today. We cannot ignore what has happened in our country over the last few weeks, and core principles of our form of government are at stake, and I appreciate members' willingness to come together on a bipartisan basis around this resolution. We need to stand up firmly as a legislative body to ensure that this never happens again. Thank you.
Roll call having been requested, the clerk will call the roll.
Doesn't work. Doesn't work. I'm telling you, it doesn't work.
You have to kick off.
Right here.
The clerk will call the names of those not using the remote voting technology.
Barr.
Barr, no.
Barr, no. Bernardi.
Bernardi, aye.
Bernardi, aye. Doubt.
Doubt votes aye.
Doubt, aye. Davney. Davney.
Yeah.
Drazkowski. Drazkowski, pass. Grossel. Grossel. Haley. Haley, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Hertas. Hertas, aye. Lippert.
Lippert, aye.
Lippert, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Miller. Miller. Pulowski.
Pulowski, aye.
Pulowski, aye. Ryer.
Ryer, aye.
Ryer, aye. Robbins. Robbins, aye. Sandell.
Sandell, aye.
Sandell, aye. Sundin.
Sundin, aye.
Sundin, aye. West.
West, aye.
West, aye. Walgamot. Walgamot, aye. What is the deal?
Sandsted votes aye.
Sandsted, aye.
Please recall Bliss.
Davney.
Davney votes aye.
Davney, aye. Drazkowski. Drazkowski, no. Grossel.
What is this one?
Grossel, no.
Grossel, no. Yeah, see, these names are.
Christensen, aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Her. Her, aye. The ones that aren't voting are remote voters that have decided not to vote.
Right, but Christensen, Sandsted, and her all voted green, and they're not green.
Christensen, oh, she's not switching. What do you vote? What do you vote? We have Christensen, aye. Sandsted, aye.
And her.
We need Sandsted and we need her. Aye.
Okay, so we need Sandstone.
Yep.
And the rest are choosing not to vote.
Which would, see, they're registered to vote remote, and then they're in the chamber and think they can vote in here, they still need the computer.
Got it.
That's what we had, problem we had last week. The only ones at their desks are you and Dalton and Winkler.
Yeah, I saw that.
Chief, did you get the posted vote?
Poston.
Posted votes aye.
Poston, aye.
Thank you.
Get that on there? You gotta switch it. Gotta switch.
Have all those who would like to be on record as voting voted? The clerk will close the roll. There being 111 ayes and 8 nays, the motion prevails. The resolution is adopted. Announcements. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, January 28th, 2021.
Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 Thursday, January 28th, 2021. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
No.
I moved through announcements pretty quickly, and we missed a remote announcement. The member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just by way of announcement, members, we talk a lot about the essential workers and the great work done by people who work in schools. For every person in a school system interacts and helps facilitate the education process for our kids, and we should recognize all of those workers. But in that acknowledgement, in this chamber, we don't always recognize all the schools and workers in our Minnesota education system. Members, this is School Choice Week, and a week to talk about with pride the entire Minnesota education system. School choice means giving parents access to the best K-12 education options for their children. These options include traditional public schools, public charter schools, magnet schools, private schools, online academies, and homeschooling. And I would call out homeschooling, especially in what we faced in our last couple of months and up to a year with the COVID crisis. What is school choice? School choice is a process of allowing every family to choose the K-12 education options that best fit their children. Every child is unique, and all children learn differently. Some children might succeed at the neighborhood public school, while others might fit in better at a charter, magnet, private, or homeschooling environment. That's why school choice is so important. These options include all forms of education, from traditional public schools, public charter schools, magnet schools, private schools, and again, to homeschooling. When we look across the board, even to our Bureau of Indian Affairs schools and our Native American schools, we can see that reaching out to all of our children is important and school choice is important. I hope you'll join me in recognizing the importance of all of our educators in our entire Minnesota education system. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Winkler moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, January 28th, 2021.